Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg, and if you remember on Friday when I did a Friday Reads video, I was having a bit of a reading slump in the month of May. The good news is I seem to have turned that around, and thank you for your help and your suggestions. That was really appreciated. You may also remember that at that point I had gotten halfway through an audiobook that I didn't like. I did ultimately DNF that book, but I'm here to talk about it, and one other book that I did finish over the weekend. So the audiobook, of course, was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. I ended up DNFing this. I believe I ended up DNFing it the same day I did the video. Basically, I really wasn't liking it. I was listening to it. I was doing kind of almost like a hate watch with the book, but it was the audio. So I was really only listening to continue being irritated at a certain point. And I just reached a breaking point where I couldn't really deal with it anymore, so I let it go. Part of what the ultimate breaking point was is that the book is set in the year 2000 into the year 2001 in New York City, so it is plainly obvious that Ottessa Moshfegh is building up to 9/11 and that that's going to be a crucial plot point. By the way, this is not a secret because you can tell based on the time the book is set, the place the book is set, and the fact that Ottessa Moshfegh kind of weaves the World Trade Center into the book. You know that it's coming, and that is something. I'm really touchy about 9/11 books. I lived in northern New Jersey at the time of the September 11th attacks, and I get really offended when it feels like it's done for a gimmicky purpose, or for sometimes when it's done for the purpose of, like, it gets reduced to becoming something that causes a personal realization in a character's life. And that's basically how it's used here. And I was getting more and more disgusted with that, and I looked online to see what ultimately happens with the 9/11 storyline, and I didn't sound like I liked the way it was handled, so I bailed. I just bailed. And I do not feel bad about it. I had read Ottessa Moshfegh's other book, Eileen, which was, I believe, a finalist for the Man Booker Prize, and I didn't like that one either. I think she has a way of deliberately trying to provoke the reader, and in ways that I don't respond to. In Eileen, there's a lot of the grotesque and a lot of scatological stuff, and again in ways that don't really make sense to me, because if I remember correctly, in the beginning of the book she presents Eileen as somebody who's almost fussily clean at work, and I think she describes her as like scrubbed raw almost, because she's that cleanly at work, or that concerned with her appearance at work. But then she goes home, and there's supposed to be a dichotomy between the way she is at work and the way she is at home, and this facade that she's putting up for the world. But it's really not believable, especially when then you're introduced to her in this way, this kind of fussy, clean way at work, concerned with her appearance, and then she goes home and she's just filthy, like in a kind of depraved way. And then for the rest of the book, it describes how, like, she goes to work and she loves having the appearance of being clean, but having this gross smell underneath that she's kind of masking. And that doesn't fit with the way she was introduced. And then the whole plot to me wasn't working, because then this woman comes in and Eileen becomes obsessed with her in a way that moves the plot forward in a very predictable way. And I just did not like the book. And that follows through to this book, where it's not scatological, but it's much more like mental. So in this book, our main character has decided that she wants to take a year off from the world. In order to do that, she wants to sleep for a year. So she's medicating herself. And she finds a psychiatrist who's willing to hook her up with a whole bunch of medications. And this character is such a cartoon that you could read it and say, well, we didn't really understand opioid addiction back in 2000. But the character is written as such a cartoon that it doesn't even really matter if you're trying to make excuses for the way it's done. And to me, the character is such a cartoon that she doesn't even really fit in with the rest of the book. And the character, it's not that I don't dislike unlikable characters. It can be done, but I think the way Ottessa Moshfegh handles these characters, I'm not inspired by them at all. I don't find them interesting. I find them just irritating. And that is My Year of Rest and Relaxation. So I did pick up a book that helped me finish a book and break my reading slump officially. A lot of you had really good suggestions for books. Unfortunately, not a lot of them were readily available at my library, so I have some of them on hold, or on my have placed them on my TBR. But since I wanted something quick and in a pinch, I did read one of the books that I mentioned in that video as a potential option, which was Fer-de-Lance by Rex Stout. I hated it. So I had never read a Nero Wolfe mystery before, but I've heard really good things about them. So I wanted to give it a try. I've heard that Rex Stout is a really good mystery writer. My problem with this book is that I didn't like the main characters. Apparently, in later volumes, the irritating things about them here get kind of dulled down and they figure things out. Nero Wolfe is kind of this prickly guy, and not that he warms up in future volumes, but it tones down his prickliness in a way that he becomes kind of like a palatable character. Archie Goodwin, his sidekick, who actually does most of the investigating and who narrates the story, is kind of horrible. He's not a nice guy, particularly to women. Apparently, in later books, he warms up. He's much more of an affable kind of presence. But as presented here, he's just horrible. And like I said, the way he treats women is really disgusting. And there are only really two, maybe three female characters in the book, and they are just treated horribly. They're means to an end, and that's basically it. It's just a really gross handling of women. And so I read Murder on the Orient Express for the first time 2 years ago, and I was really irritated by it because it doesn't seem like a mystery that you are supposed to be able to solve. Instead, you're supposed to be impressed with Hercule Poirot's detecting ability, but the reality is he makes such wild leaps of logic that there's no way you could make the connection between the two things. And it's just that he happens to make these wild leaps and they turn out to be correct. And that is exactly what Nero Wolfe does. Like, somebody will show up in the office and Nero Wolfe will look at them and make a deduct and say, "Oh, did you figure out that this person is the killer?" And they'll be like, "What? How did you know that?" And he'll say, "Well, because you're here," and or something like that. So that's not exactly what happens. He doesn't figure out the killer because somebody shows up. But basically, he's making these leaps like that, where somebody will show up at his office, and just by the very fact that they showed up at his office, he has some crucial piece of information all of a sudden. And then he'll explain how he got there, and it kind of makes sense, but also it's not really logical that he would come to that conclusion, because it seems wildly far-fetched that he would just arrive at that and be so sure about it and always be right when he comes to these outlandish conclusions. And I found that really irritating in this book. So I do not think I will be continuing in this series at all, which is a shame because I had been looking for a new mystery series to try, but this is not going to be it. I had gotten this from a used bookstore in town, and I think I'm going to send it, see if they'll take it back and give it to somebody who might like it better. But the good news is, I am listening to an audiobook right now, A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. I'm about, not quite halfway through, but I'm really enjoying it so far, so I can't wait to finish this and talk to you about that. I am also reading this book called Lie With Me by Philippe Besson. It is translated by Molly Ringwald. Yes, that Molly Ringwald from the Breakfast Club and all the John Hughes movies. She apparently speaks French fluently, and I know that she has published on her own. She wrote a very great op-ed about the Me Too movement and John Hughes a few years ago, so here she proves herself to be a good translator. I'm about 50 pages in. It is a very short novel, so I only have about 100 pages to go. Can't wait to talk to you about this as well. So that is what I've been reading now. Please tell me what you've been up to and what you've been reading. I can't wait to hear it, and thank you for your time watching this video. As always, I appreciate it. If you already subscribed, thank you for that. If not, I hope you enjoyed this enough to hit subscribe and follow along, and I'll be back. Until then, happy reading.